Say, kids, what time is it?
It's kind of like watching TV, but, in your car.
104.7 The Cave, Mike the Intern in virtual land this morning with Jay Stevens.
Are you on Mars?
I am on Mars. That's actually where I live, on Mars. Isn't that incredible?
Hang on.
Dark Side of the Stream, episode
Let me
73.
More comfortable. It's hot in here. God, why is it so hot in
well,
here?
hey, Jay was like, you're not feeling very well. You know what you need to do? Put on some black clothes. So guess what, Jay? I put on some black clothes and I'm feeling 110%.
I would have worn a beanie too. I didn't know we were taking that route, but it's all right. I didn't want to look like Antifa, I guess.
It would be the same. Beard, no beard. Beard, no beard. This is Dark Side of the Stream, where we watch movies.
Documentaries.
So you don't have to. This is episode 73. It was Jay's pick this week, and it's called The Bones Brigade. It was
a little peek into my childhood. My childhood was all based around skateboarding.
So that's a great place where I want to start, because Jay, if you did not know, grew up California, Hawaii, kind of both places, but he's a California dude, if you don't know this. And me, I grew up in the Midwest. I was born in Joplin. I grew up in Cape Girardeau. I finished high school here in Springfield. So growing up for me was all sports related. I played college. I played basketball, church league. I played baseball. I played hockey. I played soccer. I played football. I mean, I think I had some friends that skateboarded, but like I was so ingrained into sports that I never had.
Skateboarding wasn't a big thing because
it wasn't at all
hand in hand.
It wasn't really until like like I said, I had some friends that did skate, but it wasn't until the Tony Hawk video game series came out that I think like across the board everyone was just like, oh man, skating. Whether you could balance on a board or not, you definitely could pick up a controller and play Tony Hawk. So where I'm going with this is it was really cool to kind of see not only where you were at in your childhood, because skateboarding in California was as important as you hear about, like, traveling baseball teams and gymnastic teams and volleyball teams in this area, where these kids are like just like ingrained to like be professionals at what they do. Skateboarding was the same way, but in California. And I didn't really I didn't even really know that they had put teams together. I had heard of the Bones Brigade before, but I didn't know like it was that serious of a thing. Now,
and it's kind of like the birth of X Games, really. These guys we're just trying to see what was possible on a skateboard and just pushing each other, which was just excellence in anything is just amazing to watch. It develop.
Yeah. Let's start with Stacy. If you don't know, he's part of the Z Boys. And that was a group of guys in the 70s that were a bunch of kids that kind of made skateboarding, at least at that time period, popular. It was a little bit more regionally than it was nationally, like what Tony Hawk was able to do later on down the line. But those dudes from Venice really did some pretty cool stuff. One of the guys in that, Stacy, who is the director of those movies and documentaries, and also the Bones Brigade,
and
was the one
movie too.
Yeah, Lords of Dogtown and all that stuff. He was the one that directed this documentary, but he's also the one that put this team together. And right out of the gate, I have to give Stacy Peralta like all the credit in the world, because early on in the documentary, he said, I wanted to put a team together, and I wasn't looking for like the best of the best. I mean, I wanted good skaters, but there was just something else I was looking, and I wanted them young because I felt like I could develop them. Now, at first you're like, I don't know. But dude, Stacy was like a dad to these kids. And
he had a good business vision too. A lot of the other skaters didn't have a business vision. He had a business vision, And
they were making, $30 million a year at their height when that was out of the gate. Yeah,
at one point it was crazy.
And big props to Stacy, because he could have at any point exploited these kids, take advantage of them, because they're kids. They don't know any different. But from the get-go, even when they were teenagers, he was making sure they got paid. And what led to the company that he was a part of splitting up was, he was like, look, these kids are going to go off on their own anyway. I want to support them. And that's what we do. Obviously his business partner's like, I'm looking out for my business, not theirs.
Yeah.
And that is where the exploitation would happen. Stacy's like, no, screw you. I'm done. So Stacy, if you're listening, man, props to you, dude, because not only were you able to kind of keep these kids grounded and you took care of them, but you also were able to kind of hoist them up. You know, I always say the best thing that you can do as a person and a human being is, yeah, you want to take care of your business, but you always want to make sure and push everyone around you up. You want to always hoist everyone around you and that you care about up, whether it's coworkers or family members, friends, or whatever. And Stacy did that. And I mean, he was a good skater, but I think he was an even better person. And I got that out of this documentary.
Better businessman and better like team leader, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were so many times where like Tony and Rodney were talking about like, you know, going through what kids, I can't even imagine the pressure.
Yeah. Can you imagine being, you know, 12 years old and all that weight on your shoulders?
You're the best in the world. And you got to go back out and do it again in 6 months and keep that trophy. And you know, he handled it like a really awesome dude. And so, you know, normally in these things that we do, we're like, this guy, you suck. You're a dirtbag. You dirtbag. And Mike gets on here.
Biggest Dave.
Yeah, Mike gets really pissed off and yells and slams his fist down and stuff. But not on this dark side of the stream.
Well, I'm glad you got something out of this one because I knew it wasn't really your style, this one, but I was just anything that's got a story of like American dream or like striving for excellence. I just get down on those kind of stories, you know.
And I'm glad you kind of showed this to me. We'll get into more of the Bones Brigade next, Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave. 104.7 The Cave, Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens. We are back in the studio discussing Dark Side of the Stream episode 73, The Bones Brigade. Now, as I mentioned in the last break, this was a really good insight into California in the 80s and what initially would have become the explosion of skateboarding. Now, it was really interesting. I did not know that Tony Hawk's dad was like a big skater dude that, you know, got, because when you get into Tony's story, it's really you all you know is the video games and that Tony Hawk is like one of the best,
one of the greatest in the world.
He's like he's the man. You know, and he had a tough time, dude, because and they get into that like all these other skater dudes, you know, the punks and stuff. They look at this clean cut kid,
right? He's a good
blonde
kid.
Hair.
Most of the skateboarding guys, like the ones that the first generation of skateboarders, like was with the ones my dad was around. I mean, those guys we know. Smoking weed, drinking beer, partying, leather jackets. They didn't want this clean cut kid, you know, coming around and trying to beat them.
And he's destroying them. I mean, like not even funny. And he would get spit on. He would get made fun of. They rashed him hard, man. And he just kept coming back and saying, "Well, I'm going to prove it with my skating." Yep. And he did it over and over again.
Still doing it today.
He's still doing it. Still. And it was a really cool thing to see where he was at that point and how, you know, how he dealt with it. And again, back to what Stacy did for these guys. You're right. They could have been out, you know, messing with girls, drinking. They were on their own. They had one adult, you know, supervisor who was like,
money,
but you got all these other skater dudes that were like, I hated these guys. You know, they were like clean cut, blah, blah, blah. And we'd be out partying and they'd be sleeping with their boards, man. Well, that goes to Stacy. He's the one who said, you don't have to do all this stuff. You can just do what you do. And he found guys that love skating above everything else. And I think it was Lance Mountain who said, you know, what happens is when these things that you do that you're passionate about, whether it be skateboarding, sports, music, whatever, when that stops fulfilling that need, that's when drugs and women and booze start to come in because you're not getting that from that thing you love anymore.
Yeah. You're looking for more highs and more you know, wild times. And
he would hit it right on the money. And Lance, what a man at the end, whenever they were talking about, oh God, I almost got teared up when they were like talking about it. And he was just like, you know, I shouldn't even been there, but they let me be there. God, I was just like, oh man. And those guys loved him. It wasn't that he was, but they did make a really good point to talk about those videos that they made with the Bones Brigade and how Lance was kind of like,
when those were coming out, I was in, you know, high school, 9th grade or whatever. And I was in Hawaii. So I was kind of isolated at that point. When those videos were coming out, I was the first guy to order those videotapes and me and my buddies would watch and then literally like rewind, and then run outside and try to do the tricks and then run back inside and try to watch what we were doing, videotapes, you know.
How much did you have to pay for those? How much were they?
I think it was about $30 or something like that.
God,
you know?
30, man, that's so crazy.
You know?
Oh man.
But
can you think?
That was a life, man. That was a life.
Well, and on to your point, that's the thing about Lance that was cool, because you look at Tony and you look at Rodney Mullins and you're like, holy mother of God, there's no way.
Freaks,
I mean, when they first did like the 360, Lance was talking about how it took him a month to get it right. And when he did,
a month of eating it,
falling down constantly. And then he said he finally did it, and he just took his board and smashed it. Because he was so he's so mad that it took him a month to do it. But the point is, what Lance Mountain did was he made it accessible to guys like you that were eating this stuff up, that were like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do a 360 or whatever, an ollie, no touch, whatever the hell you want to call it. But what Lance is doing, and what Lance did, was
skating for the fun of it.
He was like, oh, you can skate anywhere.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a pool. You don't have to have some broken down ramp. You don't have to have, you could literally grab your board and go. And I think that was brilliant.
I drove a little beat up Toyota truck in 11th grade, I guess it was. And I would carry in the back 2 little jump ramps that we made out of wood. I drive around with them. So whenever we stop and party somewhere, we just pull them out and just start skating on them,
And that's what Lance did, which was,
we would steal wood.
Cool.
We'd go and steal wood to build half pipes in the middle of fields. We built a ramp at a Buddhist cemetery in Hawaii. We went, one guy had
I don't know about that. I don't know about that karma, dude.
An older brother had a truck. We went, they used to be called midnight runs to the lumber store. You go to the lumber store at midnight when it's closed. One guy hops the fence and starts passing 2x4s and under the board. Then you start passing plywood sheets. You steal all the wood for a ramp, drive off, and then you go and find a field somewhere and you just steal hammers, whatever you can find, build. No plans. We were just hammering, building. Built a half pipe at a Buddhist cemetery in Hawaii, and it stayed there forever. The Buddhists didn't care, I guess.
You just kept going back to it, man. Yeah. What a crazy. See, but again, that goes back to what I said in the beginning. This was a really, really good insight into that lifestyle that a lot of people, especially growing up in the Midwest, we play football, we play baseball, we play basketball. You knew guys that skated, but there was 4 guys in high school or in your class that actually knew how to skate. At least when I was growing up.
Yeah.
But that all changed. And we'll talk more about the Bones Brigade next, Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The K. 104.7 The K. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio discussing the Bones Brigade episode 73 of Dark Side of the Stream. Now let's turn our focus to Rodney.
I was just going to say the same thing. Let's stop for a second and talk about this cat, man. Because here's a cat that you find something you're good at, but also you've got some strict parenting. This cat, devotion.
He starts off where, he talks.
He's got to be autistic or something, right?
There's something. Maybe not. I don't know.
There's something very weird.
He definitely had a very, very tough, strict upbringing, and I think that played into his favor as far as his discipline with learning his craft, being focused on his craft. He got so lucky that someone saw him and called Stacy and said, hey, you got to fly this guy out.
The guy was.
He's living in Florida, middle of nowhere.
Better than anybody, things that nobody would even think of doing. This dude was doing, just made it up himself.
It's not like skating in the sense where you think of, you get on a ramp and you go up and down and do these flips and crazy things, or you're jumping off curbs and cars and whatever. What Rodney did was literally he could skate on a square patch of concrete, because he would do things where he would ride on the side of the board or in the back, and he would just do these ollie tricks. There are so many
these kids do nowadays,
manuals.
He did it all up.
Yeah, and they're literally words in Webster's dictionary that he created based on what he had to say. Well, this is what we called this trick. Yeah. This is what this trick was, or whatever it is. Trip. It's just so out the box what he was able to do with. It's kind of like when you see, these kids that are given really bad instruments and then just focus and focus and focus and focus, and then can make just beautiful sounds coming out of things where people will be like, there's no way you could do that. And then you see him do it and you're like, okay, I'm an idiot and I'm not very good at what I do. Rodney was that type of guy. He also, I can imagine, was very difficult to deal with sometimes, in the sense that there was that story about how he said he was going to get sick and they were going to a demo and just left. And the guys just waited for him. And it was obvious, they knew the deal. Like they all were just like, but again, it goes back to Stacy, man. Had Stacy not been the one to be like, look, I'm going to be in charge of these guys. I'm going to be their mentor. I'm going to get them on the right path. He did exactly that. And he stuck with him and he was there for him. And, you know, just
convincing these kids' parents too. Hey,
oh yeah, can you go into his dad say, hey, we're going to take this kid cross country?
In this day and age, there's no way anybody's going to let some dude who's like 10 years old and their kids take their kids off across the country in a little beat up VW.
It'd be like Jay Stevens showing up to your house, knocking at your door. Hey man, yeah, I saw your kid playing bass. I saw your kid playing bass at the School of Rock. We're going to put a band together. And we're just going to go through the Midwest and we're going to play all these dive bars, man. But I'm telling you, they're great. And
it'll be cool.
Yeah. Dad's going to say, all right, Jay, throw him in the van, go. No, there's no way. That was the one thing I was like, how did he convince these parents to let him fly out, teenagers to California and then go tour the state? But then you look at the money. And I mean, ultimately with Rodney, you know, at every turn when his dad was like, you're done. And then he'd see what would happen. He'd go, okay, you're right. You know, this, you have to have this. You have to have this. And he admitted, you know, his dad was strict. He wasn't a bad parent, but, you know, very, very, very strict upbringing. And, but again, that played into his thing. I loved what he said though, about their contribution. And he's like, you go into like a library and you see these books, you know, War and Peace and all these like classics that changed the world. And now they're just sitting there and they're collecting dust. No one's going to read them. No one knows anything about them. But then you look at what we were able to bring into the world and we essentially in a way changed it. Yeah. And they're right. And it's undeniable. Whether you look at, you know, you go into the mall and you go to a skate store, you see all the clothes and all these brands and all what these kids are wearing and doing. It's a culture and it's undeniable what they did and what they brought to the sport. And I think it's a very cool story that everyone should take the time and watch because it gives you an insight into what they were into, whether you like skateboarding or not. I could barely.
Yeah, it's about more than skateboarding. It's about just like, you know, like I said, people that misfits, dedicated to one thing and went off to change the world. You know,
and the kids, not people. We're talking teenagers, teenagers with one really badass adult who kept them focused and kept them on the straight and narrow. And I think Stacy, again, man, it really comes. I mean, yes, he found the talent and it was those kids doing it, but really without him, none of this would have been possible, in my opinion, at all. We will come back with our reviews and what we're watching next week. Dark Side of the Stream returns next on 104.7 The Cave. 104.7 The Cave, Mike, the intern, Jay Stevens, skating back in. It's unfortunate because
I really wanted, a half pipe as we speak.
I really wanted him to bring his skateboard into the studio.
I was going to bring it. If you would have been here in the studio, we would have done the parking lot. We would have done the parking lot and done some tricks.
Just like filming him doing ollies. But yeah, this is episode 73, Dark Side of the Stream.
How many
Bones Brigade?
How many ollies do you give this stuff?
Oh, solid four. Solid four.
Yeah, I didn't change the world, but it's just a great feel good story.
It's a great story.
I'll give it a solid 4.
I tell people I meet when I do the veteran lunch and the internships about what my favorite part of this job is, and that is I'm huge in the human connection. I'm big on the human story, and I love making connections, and I love hearing how individual life is to each individual. And that is, I think, the core of what this documentary brings is like a human connection thing, not like only the camaraderie what these guys felt with each other, but like, you know,
overcoming adversity, you know?
Oh yeah. Big time.
I mean, coming up, talk about from the bootstrapped, you know, a lot of these kids came from poor areas of town, you know, and had nothing going for them, you know.
One of them could have easily been in jail as much as the other guys.
Yeah,
you know?
Just like the previous generation, some of the Dogtown guys, you know, one of those guys ended up joining a gang and
well, that one dude with the gold teeth, he kept coming on. He's like, every time I'd come out of jail, Tony Hawk's like on a Slurpee cup.
Yeah,
and then he's got his own video game.
Were the ones Tony Hawk looked up to. They were the pros when he was coming up, when he was a little kid. They were the pros spitting on him, you know.
But he was right in the sense that he said,
I'm glad that you liked it, because I thought for sure that you were going to be like, this is a dud. I hate it.
No.
I'm glad you liked it.
I'm big on the human connection. Whatever, if it was a documentary about a group of guys that got really good at digging ditches, if there was a story and a human connection there, I'm in all day. And I thought it was good. And it was also really cool to see kind of that insight about where you were growing up in the 80s and
I
what
was
that
100%.
was. And that, if you're on the West Coast, then you know what
Hopping
we're talking
fences,
about.
skating empty pools, and
Yeah.
all that stuff. That was, I mean,
Yeah.
we'd come home from school, grab our skateboards, meet up outside, and we wouldn't come back till it was dark.
We did that, but we just did bikes around
Right.
here.
See, we just did on
It
skateboards,
was just all bikes. It was bikes, or you're going to some kind of sports practice once you got to a certain age, and that's just kind of what took over. But yeah, it's solid 4. Would you give it?
Yeah, solid 4 for sure.
Solid
Didn't
4.
change the
Oh,
world,
that
but
was
it's a great story. Yeah.
Oh, that was good. It was a good, lighthearted story that we definitely needed before we go into the next documentary,
Where are we going?
which is my pick. We are going to learn about the Torso Killer on Netflix. 3-episode series. I think it's like Times Square Killer, but he's also known as the Torso Killer in the 70s and 80s. Very hardcore dude, very gruesome dude. And it's been a minute since we talked about murder, so I felt like it was definitely due time. We got a little dirty.
And I already started watching this. We must have been on the same page. I already started watching this, and I was excited because it really talks about the history of porn as well.
Awesome. You know, I'm all about it. Pornography and
murder,
serial killers. That's
what we do. That's what Mike and I do.
It's dark. As always, you can watch us do this live, Facebook, 9 a.m. on Thursdays, and then on my show 9, Jay's show at 6. This is Dark Side of the Stream, reminding you that
we watch
documentaries
movies
so you don't have to.